All of us, at some point in life, have experienced the deep pain of loss. Sadness settles like a silent shadow, and mourning, well, he doesn't ask for permission, he just arrives and invades us completely. Sadness is one of the deepest feelings of the human being, and, paradoxically, it is this same sadness that teaches us to value joy. Have you ever stopped to think about how grief shapes who we are? What do we do with this pain? Run? Do we try to suppress it? Or do we allow it to transform us, as fire forges steel? Imagine for a moment, you are sitting, lost in your own thoughts. The world outside keeps turning, but inside you, everything seems to stand still. How many times have you experienced this? Feeling the weight of sadness as the people around you move on, maybe smiling, maybe talking about trivial things. And you are there, trying to find meaning. Grief does this to us. It isolates us on a desert island of emotions, forces us to face our deepest fears and fragilities. But what if I told you that sadness has a purpose? Not just a burden, but an opportunity for growth. The Stoics believe that adversity is opportunity in disguise, and grief, as devastating as it is one of the greatest teachers we can have. It teaches us the impermanence of life, makes us reflect on what really matters, and ultimately makes us human. When we face grief head-on, without trying to run away or ignore it, we find a strength we never imagined we possessed. The question is, how do we deal with this sadness? Do we embrace it and let it shape our worldview, or do we try to repress it? And, more importantly, do we understand that pain, like joy, is fleeting? Perhaps the answer lies precisely in the acceptance, in the understanding that living is also learning to lose. And it is in this learning that we find the true strength to move forward. In today's video we are going to reflect on the 5 best reflections that, when understood, can help us get through this difficult time with strength, resilience, and if you wish, even find comfort. The acceptance of impermanence. Life is a constant dance between birth and death, between beginning and end. From the moment we open our eyes at birth, we are surrounded by change. However, even though we know that everything around us is impermanent, we tend to cling to people, moments, things, as if they were eternal. Impermanence, a central concept in Stoic philosophies and logotherapy, invites us to reflect on this changing nature of existence. It is easy to want to cling to what is comfortable, to what brings us security. But the truth is that the only constant in life is that everything changes. Accepting this is one of the greatest human challenges, but it can also be one of the keys to a lighter and more meaningful life. Now, think about grief. The pain of losing a loved one is like a deep cut, a wound that never seems to heal. And it is precisely here that the concept of impermanence can become a powerful tool. Accepting that everything is temporary, including pain, gives us the strength to move forward. The Stoics believe that by contemplating impermanence, we could better cope with losses. They said, "You're going to lose what you love, and that's inevitable." It is not a pessimistic view, but a crude reality. When we accept this reality, we stop resisting pain. Instead, we learn to walk alongside it, more lightly. In logotherapy, Viktor Frankl, who survived the horrors of the concentration camps, emphasized that suffering is an integral part of life, but that the meaning we give to it can completely transform our experiences. He said, "When we can no longer change a situation, we are challenged to change ourselves." The acceptance of impermanence helps us to realize that suffering, like joy, is also fleeting. The power to accept that everything passes is liberating. We don't have control over every situation in our life, but we can control how we react to them. This change in perspective is what gives us the strength to face adversity and make the most of joys. But how can we really accept impermanence in our daily lives? After all, it's not something we learn overnight. There are simple practices that we can incorporate into our routine to internalize this philosophy. Meditation, for example, is one of them. By meditating, we can observe our thoughts and emotions as clouds that come and go, without clinging to them. This teaches us to let go of moments, whether they are good or bad. Another way to live impermanence is to learn to appreciate the present. Often, we are so preoccupied with the future or dwelling on the past that we forget to value the now. Impermanence teaches us that the present is all we really have. Enjoying the now, whether with family, friends, or even in moments of loneliness, is a way to honor the transience of life. True peace comes not from trying to control what we can't, but from accepting life as it is, fluid, unpredictable, full of change. The acceptance of impermanence is not an easy path, but it is a liberating one. A search for meaning. If there's one universal truth we share, it's that at some point, we're all going to experience pain. Whether it's a loss, a disappointment, or an unexpected change, suffering is part of the human condition. But what differentiates those who get lost in the abyss of pain from those who find a new path? The answer lies in something profound and transformative: the search for meaning. Pain, by itself, has no form. It can be overwhelming, chaotic, leave us aimless. However, like the fire that purifies gold, suffering has the potential to shape us, to transform us. And this transformation doesn't happen when we try to escape the pain, but when we dive deep into it, accepting it as an inevitable part of life. Pain can be the starting point for something greater, something that brings meaning to what, at first glance, seemed to be just destruction. Let's reflect on the story of Viktor Frankl, a psychotherapist who lived through the horrors of concentration camps during World War II. Frankl lost his family, faced hunger, humiliation, and the constant threat of death. But in the midst of this unimaginable suffering, he found a simple yet powerful truth: when we can no longer change a situation, we are challenged to change ourselves. And that's exactly what he did. Frankl used his pain to create logotherapy, a therapeutic approach that teaches that human beings can find purpose even in the most difficult circumstances. For him, suffering, when loaded with meaning, ceases to be just suffering. This lesson of transforming pain into meaning is reflected in many life stories. Ordinary people who, in the face of great loss, channeled their grief to create something meaningful. Think, for example, of the mothers who have lost children and, instead of being consumed by sadness, have created foundations, NGOs, and social movements to support other families in a similar situation. They transformed grief into action, and with that, gave new meaning to their own pain. This shows us that suffering, while inevitable, does not have to be the end of the line. It can be the beginning of a journey of growth and transformation. And, in fact, it is often the greatest pains that bring the greatest learning. Now, the question arises: how can we ourselves find meaning in the midst of pain? It's not an easy task, but it's possible, and it starts with small changes in perspective. First, it is necessary to accept that pain is part of life. Resisting suffering only prolongs it. Instead, it is important to embrace pain, understanding that it brings with it the opportunity for growth. A second strategy is to ask yourself, what can I do with this experience? Turning pain into meaning is not about forgetting what happened, but about finding a way to use that experience for good. It could be helping others who are going through the same situation, it could be creating something new, or even simply using grief to strengthen your own resilience. At the end of the day, what really matters is not avoiding pain, but how we cope with it. We can let it destroy us, or we can use it as a tool to grow, evolve, and, above all, find a greater purpose. Remember, it's not the pain that defines you, but what you do with it. Developing resilience. When sadness comes, she doesn't ask permission. It simply invades. It arrives quietly but heavy, and confronts us with feelings that we often prefer to avoid. But what if, instead of trying to run away or fight it, we learn to develop resilience from that sadness? This is the turning point that defines who we are and who we can become. Resilience, which many believe to be just the ability to endure hardship, goes further. It is our ability to adapt and grow in the face of adversity. It is not just about resisting, but about transforming ourselves with the scars we carry. In a world that is always on the move, where pain and loss are inevitable, resilience becomes one of our most valuable tools. Let's think about it for a moment. We've all experienced sadness. Whether it's through a loss, disappointment, or something that just didn't go as planned. But what makes this emotion so powerful? Sadness, though painful, can be our best teacher. It forces us to look within, challenges us to question what really matters. And, more importantly, it reminds us that we are stronger than we realize. Thus, the question that remains is, how can we transform sadness into a tool for personal strengthening? First, it is necessary to recognize sadness. Often, our first reaction is to avoid or numb this emotion, but this only prolongs it. By embracing sadness, we take the first step toward becoming more resilient. It's like recognizing a storm. We cannot control it, but we can prepare for it. Sadness also invites us to pause. In a world where we are constantly encouraged to move forward, sometimes it is necessary to stop, breathe, and reflect on what we are feeling. This is the moment when we find inner strength. When we allow ourselves to feel fully, we also make room for the learning that comes with it. And then, resilience begins to blossom. It is in this silence, in facing the shadows, that we discover what we are capable of bearing. Sadness shows us our limits, but it also reveals our ability to overcome them. Now, you may be wondering, how, in practice, can we cultivate this resilience after moments of loss or disappointment? There are simple but powerful exercises that can help with this process. The first exercise is conscious reflection. Take a moment out of your day to write or meditate on what you're feeling. Ask yourself, what is this sadness trying to teach me? By doing this, you begin to give a new meaning to the pain. It is not a matter of ignoring it, but of learning from it. Another exercise is self-compassion. Often, we are to ourselves, believing that we should be stronger or we shouldn't feel pain at all. But the truth is that we are human, and pain is part of our journey. Treating yourself with kindness during these difficult times is crucial to building resilience. Sadness can bring us down, but it can also be the fertile ground from which our greatest strength grows. The secret lies in how we respond to it. Do we accept and learn, or do we resist and wear ourselves out? By choosing the first path, we develop a resilience that allows us to not only survive the storms of life, but to flourish even in the midst of chaos. Connecting with nature. When we talk about healing, we often think of complex solutions, of answers that require effort and constant search. But what if the key to this healing was all around us, within our reach, in the simplicity of what we often ignore? Nature, this scenario that has always existed and that has accompanied humanity since the beginning, may be the medicine we didn't know we needed. And both Stoic philosophy and logotherapy already pointed to this connection with the natural as a path to balance and well-being. In Stoic philosophy, there was a deep understanding that the human being is part of a greater whole. The Stoics believed that, just like the trees, rivers, and mountains, we are only a small part of the cosmos, and recognizing this interconnectedness brings us humility and, above all, serenity. When we observe nature in its continuous cycle of life, death, and renewal, we are reminded that impermanence is the only constant, and rather than resisting it, we must learn to accept and flow with it. Viktor Frankl also emphasized that human beings need something greater than themselves to find meaning in life. And for many, this search for meaning can be satisfied by reconnecting with the natural world. Being in the midst of nature offers us a different perspective. Suddenly, our worries seem smaller, in front of the immensity of a forest, the horizon in the sea, or the stillness of a mountain. It is no wonder that, in recent years, several scientific studies have proven what the Stoics and logotherapists already intuited, the connection with nature has a direct impact on our emotional well-being. A study conducted at Stanford University showed that people who spent only 90 minutes walking in natural environments had lower levels of mental rumination, that incessant repetition of negative thoughts that often traps us in suffering. In addition, regular contact with nature has been linked to reduced stress levels, improved mood, and even increased ability to concentrate. Think about it. How many times have you felt overwhelmed, with no way out, and decided to take a walk outdoors? And how many times has this simple pause, surrounded by the sound of leaves swaying in the wind or the singing of birds, brought a sense of clarity? Nature has the power to remind us of who we are. It puts us back in the present, making the problems that seemed so big become a little lighter, more manageable. But how can we integrate this connection in a practical way into our daily lives? The truth is that we don't need great adventures or exotic trips to benefit from nature. Just take the time to be present in the midst of it. Here are some simple and powerful suggestions. First, try practicing mindfulness in natural settings. It can be in a nearby park, a garden, or even on your balcony, watching the sky. Sit quietly, notice what's around you, the colors, the sounds, the textures. Let your thoughts flow, but without getting caught up in them. Nature offers a perfect setting for the practice of mindfulness, as it itself is constantly in a state of presence. Another effective practice is to walk unhurriedly. Not as a form of physical exercise, but as a way to reconnect with the natural rhythm of things. Feel the ground beneath your feet, breathe the air around you, and let yourself be enveloped by the details that often go unnoticed. The smell of the earth, the warmth of the sun on your skin, the sound of running water. Also, if possible, try to spend a few moments of your day watching the sunrise or sunset. These are natural moments of transition that, in a symbolic way, remind us of the impermanence of all things. By observing the cycle of the sun, we are in direct contact with the flow of time, which helps us to better accept the changes and cycles of our own life. And lastly, if you live in an urban environment and feel that nature is far away, remember that nature can be brought to you. Plants at home or at work are not just decorative elements, they bring with them a little of this natural world that we seek so much. Taking care of a plant, observing its growth, understanding its cycle, puts us in touch with the flow of life itself. Nature teaches us that everything has its time. Just as trees grow in silence and waters run their course, we too can find our strength and wisdom in stillness, simplicity, and acceptance. The cure is not in avoiding pain, but in learning from it, in reconnecting with what really matters. The acceptance of pain. Sometimes it seems that pain is something we try at all costs to avoid. We run away from it, get distracted, or simply push it away, hoping it will disappear on its own. But the truth is that pain, whether physical or emotional, is part of our experience of being alive. The big question is, how can we deal with it without being consumed? Here, we enter the concept of mindfulness. This practice, which has its roots in millennia-old traditions like Buddhism, also finds a strong connection with Stoicism. The Stoics already taught that we cannot control what happens to us, but we can control how we react to it. Mindfulness invites us to do just that, be present, observe without judging, and instead of fighting pain, accept it as part of the present. Imagine being in a storm. You can run, hide, fight the wind. Or you can just stand still, watch the storm go by, and realize that, as scary as it is not eternal. The practice of mindfulness is similar. When we feel pain, our first reaction is to resist. We want to push it away, deny it. But mindfulness teaches us to embrace this pain. It's not about liking pain, but about allowing it to exist without destroying us. Many people think that practicing mindfulness is something complex, inaccessible. In reality, it can be as simple as breathing consciously, observing your thoughts and sensations without getting attached to them. By doing so, you begin to understand that pain is only one part of your experience, not the entirety of it. There's a common practice in mindfulness called body scanning. It is a technique where you slowly direct your attention to different parts of the body, noting any tension, pain, or discomfort without judging. Instead of trying to change these sensations, the goal is simply to recognize and accept them as part of the present moment. This doesn't mean that pain magically disappears, but as we change our relationship with it, it loses some of its power over us. In addition, there is the practice of conscious breathing, which is one of the most accessible tools for moments of pain. When we are suffering, our breath tends to become short and shallow, exacerbating stress and anxiety. By focusing on the breath, slowly and deeply, we are able to break this cycle and bring our attention back to the now. The pain is still there, but the way we perceive it changes. For many, mindfulness may seem theoretical, far from everyday reality. But the truth is that it is a practice accessible to anyone, at any time. It's a matter of practice and habit. Now, how can we integrate mindfulness into our daily lives? A simple plan starts with small moments of mindfulness. Set aside 5 minutes a day to sit quietly, focus on your breathing, and simply observe. If the mind wanders, which it certainly will, that's fine. The goal is not to block thoughts, but to bring them back to the breath whenever they get sidetracked. Over time, you can increase this practice time, but the most important thing is to maintain consistency. When you feel pain, physical or emotional, try not to rush away from it. Pause instead. Breathe. Notice what is happening in your body and mind, without trying to change or judge. Pain is an inevitable part of life, but suffering is optional. By changing our relationship with pain through the practice of mindfulness, we find a lighter, gentler way to deal with adversity. Pain is a storm that will test our endurance. By facing it with courage, we discover not only who we are, but who we can become. By practicing these lessons, we find a new way to deal with pain, not by fighting it, but by learning to be with it, to listen to it, and eventually to overcome it. If this video made you reflect, know that there is much more waiting for you. Here, you'll find other content that will help you develop the resilience, wisdom, and clarity you need to face life's challenges. Every step toward knowledge is a step toward a fuller life. I'll wait for you in the next video.